So for us, in terms of what we could pay out, hypothetically speaking, would be 2 to 3 cents. So even on a 50-cent offering, that's 5%, give or take.
Talking silver here today with Silver Crown Royalties. And Peter, listing is on the way, financing also making progress, and silver beyond $30. So it looks like a good place to be for Silver Crown Royalties right now.
Yes, it is. No, I mean, we could not have been luckier with timing. It's, it's almost as if all the stars were aligned for this particular offering. And it really, I think it still presents a great opportunity for investors in terms of the pricing of the financing, because the value of the unit that we're offering really hasn't changed in the last year. And, silver's up 40%, give or take, in the last year. 35% technically. One of the best performing metals. In fact, I think it's the best performing commodity outside of copper, which is 33% in 1 year. But the pricing, again, has not changed for us. The company has changed as well. We've gone from this time last year, we had almost no ounces. At the end of May, we closed on 2 million ounces of silver. We now have over 4 million ounces of silver in the ground that's attributable to us. So the valuation of the company, I would argue, improved significantly, yet the offering price is more or less unchanged in the last year. So great opportunity.
And perhaps we can talk a bit more about that valuation. What market cap are we currently looking at? How many shares outstanding are there? And what is that offering, Peter?
Right. So if we close on the full $5 million that we're looking for, we're going to have 50 million shares out at 50 cents. So it's about 25 million Canadian market cap. So just under 20 US. In terms of valuation metrics, it depends. Again, based on what we have in the pipeline, the transactions that we have in terms of letters of intent, but we haven't closed yet in terms of definitive agreements. Based on what we have in the presentation, we're looking at 80,000 ounces on an annualized basis, which would put us in a revenue range of sort of 3.5 million Canadian, and comparables trade between 20 and 30 times sales. That might seem extreme for some investors, and arguably it would be if we only look at sales. However, with royalty companies, one has to keep in mind that these are extremely high margin businesses. Roughly 99% for a mature royalty company will flow directly from sales to free cash flow. So you're now talking between 20 and 30 times free cash flow, which even in this market is arguably defensible. So that kind of brings us to what our free cash flow could hypothetically look like. 1.5 to 2 million based on the current pipeline, based on the current metal price. So 20 to 30 times, well, that's the hypothetical upside here. And I'm going to let the viewers draw their own conclusions as to how we're pricing this particular offering. But one thing that I will also point out, that we really haven't changed the unit value of the offering in the last 12 months. So when we did the last raise, it was a 40-cent unit, half share warrant at 80 cents. So the value of that warrant, half warrant rather, would have been about 3 cents. We're doing a 50-cent unit offering now with an 80-cent full share warrant. So that is now valued about 11 cents, 12 cents. So the total unit value 12 months ago was 37 cents and is now 39 cents. That's not that much of a difference. We're talking 5% here. And silver is up 35% over that time frame. And our in situ ounces have more than doubled over that time frame. So arguably there's some money being left on the table here with this financing. And maybe that is why, we're sort of soft circled at 2.5 million, 2.6 million out of the 5 that we're looking for right now.
I'm talking about the free cash flow, Peter. Do you already have an indication on what you're going to use that? Is that money going to be reinvested, or are you going to pay out in dividends to shareholders?
Once we do generate free cash flow, we will pay out as much as we can in dividends. Now, we have not passed a board resolution to that effect yet because we don't have any free cash flow, but that's always been the intent with the company, and why we built this company was to be a dividend payer out of free cash flow that we generate from the various royalties that we create.
Very interesting, especially as royalties are high on the agenda for investors here in Europe. And we see a lot of other royalty companies in the mining space being quite disciplined on payouts, rather reinvesting, and then obviously not scoring very high with dividends of 1.5%, whereas European investors that are active in the dividend space are more looking for 4 to 5% per year.
So for us, in terms of what we could pay out, hypothetically speaking, would be 2 to 3 cents. So even on a 50-cent offering, that's 5%, give or take. So that certainly would fit, Arne, with what the European investors would be looking for. Internally, what our target is when it comes to return on invested capital, we're targeting 10%. And if you're looking to pay all that out in dividends, well, that's 10% dividend yield. Now, once we're trading in the market, we will trade wherever we trade. That's up to the market to decide on what the dividend yield looks like. But in terms of how we deploy capital, the objective is if somebody puts $1 million in on a private placement, what we aim to do is deploy the capital in such a way that it would generate a 10% return on invested capital on that money. So 20, 30% internal rate of return deals. Some of them work, some of them don't. And it ends up hopefully hitting that 10% return on invested capital target. Now, if we look at other royalty companies, that's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. For instance, Wheaton Precious, they have a return on invested capital of 8%. And there are others that are plus minus. But if you look at the large caps, it's generally 9-10% range, which is phenomenal if you look at what other investment offerings there are out there that you can put your money into.
Yeah, and talking about range, volatility in the silver market, if we look at the silver price in 21, 22, it traded within quite a narrow range, average of $22. Now we have more volatility in the market. Is it making it more difficult to actually reach agreements in terms of this higher volatility in the silver market right now?
It really hasn't impacted us. The volatility has been more recent, maybe last couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. We tend to look at 52-week trailing averages. And because the silver component is so small relative to what the miner actually produces, plus minus 10% to them doesn't make that much of a difference overall. So, has it made any kind of a major impact? Not yet. Obviously, yes, the silver price has gone up. So instead of using 22, maybe we use 24. But certainly, not looking at 35 or 50 or any other such number, not yet anyway.
Yeah, and just to keep in mind, we also had 20 to 30% inflation, rising costs for mining over the last few years. So if you add that to an average price of $22 in 21, then silver needs to be beyond $30 anyway, just to reflect the cost and the rising costs due to inflation.
Yeah, that's correct. And back to royalty companies, obviously, that's something that we don't have to worry about because our only outlay really when it comes to costs is salaries. And those tend to be fixed through time. And you can see that in annual information forms and proxy statements, etc. You know exactly how much executives make, so you know exactly what that cost structure has looked like over the last few years. But just because oil is up 10% year on year doesn't mean that your salary is going to go up 10%. Unlike with a producer, where obviously consumables, energy, etc., are a very significant component of your cost structure.
So Peter, exciting times ahead. Good that you already filed with the exchange, that very likely you are going to list in Q3 of this year, and that you've already closed 2.6 of your 5 million funding at 50 cents. You've got a stock ticker already, SCRI. And how can investors at home take part in that funding round right now?
Certainly. They can visit silvercrownroyalties.com or just email us at info@silvercrownroyalties.com, and we'll be happy to accommodate and take a call, answer any questions.
We'll put the details down below in the comments. Thanks again, Peter.